This is not about a blow dryer, and if you thought it was, well, buckle up, Buttercup, because these conversations are hotter than that flat iron you're still wondering if you left on. I'm Kat, a hairstylist, educator, and one of the beauty industry's beautifully defiant misfits. This podcast isn't about viral hair trends, client bashing, or the latest formula for whatever shade of brown we're renaming this season. It's about the stories, the lessons, and the trial and error moments that shape careers, confidence, and the craft. So whether you're starting your journey in Cosmo School, thriving behind the chair, still finding your rhythm, or just looking for that push to get back on track, welcome to This Is Not About a Blow Dryer, where we talk beauty in a whole new way.
Welcome back to another episode of This Is Not About a Blow Dryer. As per usual, I'm Kat, here to have conversations with you to leave the industry better than we found it. So the last couple of weeks, we have been talking about standards in our series Confessions of an Apprentice. And if you really tuned into my first episode, you heard a lot about my first experience of when it came to, honestly, my first real encounter with really high standards, but also all of the ways that it kind of helped shape me now. Last week, we had Annie Fisher on talking about standards, her take on them. And this week, I actually wanted to bring on an OG man, myth, and legend. But first, we will do our card pull. And this week's card pull, your potential is endless. Absolutely. Never limit yourself. We always have so many different avenues and things that we can do, especially in our industry. You know, whether you're someone like Annie who goes and publishes and reads a book, you know, you're somebody like Christy, one of our earlier guests, who starts a consulting business to really just help women feel beautiful in and out. If you're like Christina, launching a product line, doing competitions, doing shows, or even someone like me who just goes and explores different types of educations, teaches behind the chair, and stands here behind the microphone, yapping, and yapping. And enough of that. I have yapped enough. If you've been following along, you definitely heard my episode of standards. And this week, I have the privilege of sharing with you not only one of my favorite mentors, because he keeps it real and says it how it is, but also the guy behind the he's coming. You know that guy? He's here. His name is Rodger Azadganian, and he has been in the industry for 35 plus years behind the chair as well as salon ownership. Rodger owns 2 salons currently, one in Charlotte, North Carolina, and 8 salon also here in Seattle, Washington, which is actually my home base. Thanks for making time today, Rodger. How's it going?
Going good.
Awesome.
Now it's awkward. Okay.
All right, we're rocking and we're rolling. So, Rodger, you know, you were my true first experience with what is high standards. And high standards are, you know, I think something that have really followed me in my career and I'm super grateful for, but it was a little on the intense side. I would love your take. To you, what do standards mean? Are they like truly non-negotiable? How do you get about really committing to standards that are non-negotiable regardless of other people's opinions or thoughts? I want your take. Let's pick your brain.
Oh, okay. Well, I think everything in life is negotiable. However, standards can't be compromised. So it's 2 different things. So as far as standards go, standards don't happen overnight. Standards are something you decide you want and something you decide you're going to uphold and something you decide you're going to live up to, but they don't happen overnight. First thing that has to happen is you have to embody whatever those standards are yourself, because you can't enforce anything you don't embody. Second thing is you can't be compromising, but you can negotiate people into those standards. Meaning that if your standards are written in blood or written in stone, then 90% of people that we work with, you'd have to fire. But if your standards are written in such a way that they're compromised to that point, meaning that somebody comes in and you understand it takes time to, and I'm talking about salon situation right now, but it can apply to any business. And somebody comes in you have to, they have to, how do you say it? They have to understand how to shape and mold their image, their outlook, their state of mind. And it takes time to get somebody to see things differently because you have to get people to think differently. And to get them to think differently, you have to get them you can't force anybody into it and you can't show them the way. You have to get them to understand the way for themselves. And that takes time. So that's what I mean by negotiating those standards, because you have to negotiate them into those standards through the process of getting them to think about things differently than they've been thinking about. Because most people they've been told what to think, but they've never been told how to think or taught how to think. And once people learn how to think, then I think everybody wants to be better. Everybody wants to do better. Everybody wants to give more because I think that's the nature of who we are. So that's what I mean by standards have to be upheld and uncompromising, but negotiated into in a sense, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I also think like if I what I'm hearing is aligned with what you're saying is, you know, standards also have a very clear and concise
Yeah,
like message, right? So whether it's like the action or whether it's the actual purpose behind it, one of the things that I talked about in my standards episode and my experience in that was, it was intense. What the expectation was, whether you were the apprentice on the color wall or whether you were the apprentice that was assigned for laundry, bathrooms, no water spots, any of that. It was so non-negotiable, but it was also so clear. There was so much clarity on what exactly the expectation was. It was almost dummy proof, for lack of a better word, right? Because it was like,
but
oh, you cannot see that water spot. Oh, if you leave here, that's unacceptable.
what
You
you're
have
talking
to be
about
here
is
at this point.
culture. What you're talking about now
Culture.
is culture, right?
Okay.
So the standards are what were a part of what the culture is of the company. So standards are, so I say we all agree on our set of values that we have. Here's our standards. We want to make sure we're 15 minutes early every day. We want to make sure we're only wearing, we don't wear any jeans. We want to make sure we greet the customers in a certain way. All the touch points that you have to go through in any business, you figure those out and make sure you do them to the best of we possibly can or the best of your ability. So once you figure that out, those are your standards. The culture then is to get the people to believe in those standards and want to uphold those standards. So that's so when you say you experienced that, you remember that and how it was and how people felt that you have to do this, you have to do that. Yeah, because at a certain point, people get that you're serious and you hold them accountable. And I think that's the hardest thing that most people have a tough time doing, especially in business, holding other people accountable to certain standards in order to create that culture and mindset that you need that defines you as a company, as a business.
Yeah. Now, do you find that in that sense, accountability, do you think that there's a difference between being demanding and being disciplined? Because I think those are two things that can get very confusing to people, where it's like they'll see the word demand and maybe even pair it per se with something like toxic versus like the discipline, the action, and the accountability. What's your take on that?
Well, let's see, the demanding is not toxic. Demanding is most people don't hold themselves accountable. Most people live in a mediocre state. Most people live just to their means of what gets them by, and they don't strive for anything higher because they're. And my belief is, and most people probably disagree with this, most people are afraid of success. They're not afraid of failure because they fail on a daily basis most of the time. They fail to do the things they should do to get ahead. They fail to do the things they should do to build a system for their lives or a structure in their lives. They fail to do the things they should do with every client. They, let things fall through. So they're failing every day. They're not succeeding at the level they want to be succeeding. And they have a fear of that because most people don't want to work that hard because they think it means that they have to give up their free time. They have to do this. They lose their friends. They lose whatever. And yeah, to go to the next level, it takes that kind of discipline. And you will lose a certain amount of friends because and you want to because the income that you make for most people, you've heard this old cliche that if you take the 5 of your closest friends and average out what everybody makes, that's what you make, and And you don't want to hang around if you're making $50,000 a year. Why would you want to hang around people that are making $50,000 a year? You want to hang around people that are making 100,000 a year. When you're making 100,000 a year, you want to hang around people that are making 200,000 a year. And then when you're making 200,000 a year, we're going to hang around people making $1 million a year, because that's how you learn from them what they're doing, how they're doing it to get to where they are. And then you also watch them to their goals and aspirations of where they're going, and it gives you, inspires you to want more. It's good to want more in life because it makes you better. You have to become a better person to get more. You have to a better person, that not necessarily a more honest, but yeah, I think most people do that. You have to learn how to work with integrity, but that also means you have to work a lot harder. You have to dedicate more hours, maybe. You have to, and your group of friends narrow, because people on the weekend. I mean, Amy and we I don't think we have a day off because we work 7 days a week. We have different hours during those times, right? Sometimes we're 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. The kids are mellowed out. She's emailing. I'm doing stuff. We get up early this morning. We had early call this morning at 7 a.m. our time. Then we had an 8 a.m. meeting, 9 a.m. meeting, 10 a.m. meeting, and now we're talking to you. So it's like we don't ever stop. However, are we've structured our life to where we get what we need, the kids what they get they need, and the businesses get what they need, and that's why we're at it 7 days a week. We don't sit there. You can't, when you're an entrepreneur, which I think most people are, they just don't see themselves out. And I think Gene used to say something really great, which was an intrapreneur, which is what you are in a business. This hairdresser is in a business. You're an entrepreneur. You're inside the business, but you're still an entrepreneur within that business, because you have the ability to make as much money as you want. You have the ability to do as much as you want to do. You just have to be willing to do it. Because if if a hairdresser or a salesperson or a real estate agent or anything like that fills up their books every single day, and even if you're a realtor and you have appointments set up every single day, all day long, 3 or 4 weeks in advance, you're bound to close deals and make money. Well, hairdressing, the same way. If you're booked up that much, you're bound to retain those clients, grow those clients, and raise your prices. It's all up to the entrepreneur. But if you're an entrepreneur in that sense, there is no downtime. It's 24/7 deal.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then again, who you surround yourself with, that's going to be a big thing in that, right? Because if you're
Mhm.
constantly, for lack of a better word, grinding it out, and you're working and you're on these schedules and you're on this regimen, people are going to fall off. But at the same time, people are going to come in, and on that note, a lot of new mentors come in. A lot of people that are doing like what you want to be doing are starting to make their way in. And in
If you're
that,
not
sometimes,
grinding, you're not
uh,
grinding. You're not grinding.
you're not
You have
grinding.
the you no, you're not grinding. Grinding to me is when you are working at something you hate, you don't love, and you're doing to make money. In which case you will never make money, because I believe money is a byproduct of purpose. When you understand and you find your purpose, now purpose isn't like I'm going to go up on a religious find and find my purpose. That's not what I mean. You're not your purpose in life. Your purpose in life is to find your daily purpose. Your purpose in life is to understand that every day you have a purpose, which your purpose is to be the best version of yourselves, doing the best job you possibly can in the best way possible, and giving the most you possibly can. That's your purpose. And if you understand that, money becomes a byproduct of that purpose.
Yeah. And in being the best person and the best doing things in the best way possible, then you open the doors for people to be able to come in and give you things like constructive criticism or feedback or things of the sort. We had a great constructive criticism and feedback moment before
Yeah,
that I wish
yeah,
I would have
yeah.
hit record on, because it was the epitome of why I asked you to be here. Because you are very raw, you're very real, you're very honest. You give your perspective on it, and I think there's a lot of value to it, or at least I see that. But not everybody's great at taking constructive criticism. What do you think is how do you go into training that muscle of receiving constructive criticism without ego?
Um, well, you really can't, because you can't. And I think there was an acceptance speech that Nelson Mandela did when he came out of jail for all the years he was in, and it was a poem he recited by Marianne Williamson. And in that poem, there's a part that says you can't lower yourself to make other people feel better about themselves. And I think that speaks to what you just said. You have to ask other people to rise up to your standards, being that you actually are setting those standards with who you are and how you're being every day. You have to ask others to rise. And so, you know, I can't. I'm not the kind of person that says, okay, well, I'm afraid I'm going to hurt their feelings, so I better say it in this way or do it in this way because I'm bringing my standards down. I'm bringing my whatever down to do that, and I can't do that because then I'm not being the best version of me with delivering what I need to deliver with the right intent because I actually care and want to make a difference and do the right thing, just like I did with you in the beginning. Those intentions were, well, she's going to do this. I'm going to give her my opinion, whether she asks for it or not, doesn't matter. I'm going to give her my opinion because I'm somebody looking into the fish tank, and she's the fish swimming around. I'm looking into the fish tank, so I have to tell her what I see, because not that it matters, but everybody sees things differently than we do, and you want to know how other people see it, right? And so I don't know, I'm going on a tangent, but I think you know what I mean. But on your previous question, when you talk about grind, what I was trying to get at was it's a privilege. If you understand that it's a privilege, and it sounds corny as sappy as fuck, but if you understand that it's a privilege every single day to be able to get up and put your 2 feet on the ground and be able to move and do things that you're able to do in a healthy state where and at a place where you have the freedom to do whatever you want to do because we live in such a great country that allows for that. That in itself is powerful. And if you understand that, you find your purpose, you do what you're supposed to do, you make shit happen, and it's not a grind because you come at it from the right perspective and the right mindset.
Yeah. So Roger, you travel around and you teach with, for your hair care line, Ozcraft Luxury Hair Care. And you do business classes and whatnot. But, when you're in salon, you also work a lot with, younger stylists, all stylists. What's some guidance or what's something that younger stylists often misunderstand about the idea of opportunity, readiness, and earning trust, not only with the client, but within their salon culture?
They think it's about them, has nothing to do with them, nothing at all. And it's the ego. That's all it is. They think just like when they were with a client, and it's no different than I think in any profession. Everybody approaches a client and they try to be interesting. I did this weekend. I did that weekend. I'm going here tonight. I just traveled there. I just did there. Clients don't give a shit about who you are and what you've done. They want you to give a shit about them. And that's where you become interested in who they are, what they did, what they're doing this weekend, what they did last weekend, how their life is, what's going on. That's what it's about. Because as my my mentor, one of my mentors, I think Gene Juarez said, hair doesn't walk into a salon. Hair is attached to a person that walks into a salon. So we have to understand how to build relationships. And that's the most important thing. And that's what the hairdressers lack is, I see, and I think is they don't understand how to build those relationships because they're not focused on it. They're focused on hair, and hair has nothing to do with it. Just like in a good restaurant, you have to still deliver a good haircut and good hair color, but that's not what we're selling. That's not what we're doing. Just like Starbucks wasn't selling a cup of coffee, they were selling community. We have to understand what it is we're truly selling, and in our business, trust is part of that currency. Building those relationships is part of that currency. The experience of that is what we're selling, and hair happens to be a part of that, but it's not what people are paying for because that's like the diamond they can get at Zales versus the same diamond they can get at Tiffany's. The diamond hasn't changed, but the environment, the perception of value changes because of the experience.
Yeah, I feel like something you talk about a lot is, building that connection with your client, which is obviously what you were talking about now, building that connection and really how it is beyond the hair. And, I talk about this moment all the time. I love a specific restaurant and the food is always amazing. The experience is always great. And yet my last couple experiences there, the food was great. The service was, still okay, but I'm still upset about like a certain crummer. For example, they always come by and crumb the table and take the bread off of the table because there's always this consistent experience, right? And obviously still the same restaurant, still the same food, but the crummer is the last thing that I remember, right? And it's the standard wasn't consistently there regularly. So what's a way that you find that you can consistently keep the standard up to par without forgetting those little details, or talk about the importance of the little things that sometimes aren't so little.
Well, God's in the details, not the devil. And I think that's where I've had to learn how to, and this is where the compromise comes in that I was talking about earlier. I've had to learn how to um, soften, put a velvet on the hammer, soften my delivery so that I can get people to understand. And it takes longer, and this approach takes longer. But I'd rather rule by love than rule by fear. Is the difference of my personal growth. And from when I first started 7 and now that I'm doing 8 in the product line. So ruling by love means you try to get people to understand in a way that opens up their mind and their heart and the possibilities of what they have and what they can do versus you got to do this, which works, but it's a whole different culture pointing the finger and you got to do this because in the long run, those kind of cultures don't last. And in the long run, people don't find happiness and you have turnovers in those kind of cultures. But the kind of cultures where they're led with love and you get people to understand their potential and then to open up and blossom into that potential, those kind of cultures, are more stable and their turnovers are a lot less and the problems and mistakes are a lot less. You'll still make problems, you'll still have problems, you still make mistakes. People still do bad haircuts, you still get bad reviews, but there's just less of it. It's a lot more. Foundation's a lot stronger because the vision's a lot clearer.
What's one final thing and one final thought that you would want the listeners to listen to, or even something that you would say to your younger self that maybe somebody listening to would say, huh, that's me right now, and that you wish you would have heard in your younger years?
Have a good cup of coffee more often. Yeah. It's good for you.
Have a good, no hard truths.
Yeah, I said everything I was going to say. I mean, it's don't be afraid of success. I mean, embrace failure and don't be afraid of success. And most people embrace failure and are afraid of success, and that's why they get stuck, and that's why they hit that glass ceiling. It's like the old story of the fleas in a jar. If you put a top on a fleas in a jar and you got 100 fleas jumping around this jar, they hit on their head. After a couple of weeks, you take the top off, they still won't jump past where the lid was because they've been conditioned to stay in that area. And so our job, I believe, in this life is to pop that lid off and to see how high we can jump and how much potential we really have, because that's where real fulfillment, I think, is found. And that's when money really comes in, because you find a purpose. And everybody wants money. We all need money because you need to go on your trips. You need to buy your house, your car. You need to give to your favorite foundation, help out your friends, whatever it is, buy your bags, everything, food on the table, anything it is. We all need money. There's just two really fundamental approaches that I learned through my mentors. One is you're trying to make money and all you think about is money, in which case you don't make money. Or you find a purpose and feed that purpose, nurture that purpose, and do everything you can in your power to be the best you can be, delivering that purpose, and the money will follow.
Fail forward. He says, fail forward. I love it. Well, thanks, Rodger, for making time today. I appreciate having you here. And thank you for coming to another episode of This Is Not About a Blow Dryer. See you next time.
It's not. Bye.